the traditional way to start such a gathering is that we will garland the photograph of Dr Ambedkar. While that's happening, I will shout something very loud, and your response will be, Vijay Aso. Have a practice. Vijay Aso.
Vijay Aso.
Good, and we'll do it 3 times. So I'll ask Pete to come and do the deed.
Baba Saheb Dr Ambedkarancha.
Vijay Aso.
Baba Saheb Dr Ambedkarancha.
Vijay Aso.
Baba Saheb Dr Ambedkarancha.
Vijay Aso.
Good. Meaning victory to Dr Ambedkar.
Yay.
And another tradition, of course, a deeply Indian tradition, is to welcome the honoured guest. So our special guest today is Dharmachari Tejadhamma from Nagpur, India, and I'm going to ask Mark to garland Tejadhamma. So if you come to the front. So you'll hear much more from Tejadhamma later. So we're going to be up here for about 2.5 hours, and there's no structured breaks. So again, in very Indian style, feel free to get up, go to the toilet anytime you need to, stretch your legs, just feel at home, feel relaxed. But there won't be a particular time when we all go and have a break together. Okay, so we're here to celebrate. So it was 60 years ago yesterday that Dr Ambedkar and many hundreds of thousands chose to break free from the Hindu caste system and to embrace Buddhism. Just take a break. It's very Indian. And all throughout the week, all last week, there's been great celebrations, particularly in Nagpur, which was the place where that conversion happened. And so celebrations have been happening in all sorts of local viharas around Nagpur and in other parts of India. So at a local level. That was taken on Tuesday. So that's at Nagaloka in Nagpur, which is a big training institute, which is part of Tejadhamma. As part of that day, 120 people from Gujarat state made the decision to go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. So 120 more new members of the great Buddhist movement. I was speaking to a friend of mine who was present at some of those things, and I just asked, "What's it like there? What does it feel like?" And he just said, "Oh, it's wonderful, so joyful, so inspiring." He said, and he particularly mentioned just seeing 120 new people going for refuge. So that's an old photo, but that So that's the conversion ground where the original conversion took place, and that gives you an idea of the numbers of people that travel from all over India and outside India too, actually, to pay their respects to Dr. Ambedkar. Okay, so that's India, that's Nagpur. Why us? What's it got to do with us? Why are we celebrating Ambedkar Day? Why are we celebrating the conversion of Dr. Ambedkar? So, a number of reasons. So, the first reason that we celebrate Dr. Ambedkar is that Buddhism aside, forgetting about Buddhism, by any standards, Dr. Ambedkar was an incredible human being. So he was born an untouchable. So according to the caste system, there are 4 basic caste groups. And then underneath that who are outside the caste system, come the untouchables. So he was born the 14th of 14 children into an untouchable family. And for an untouchable, there's a very ancient script in terms of what your life should look like. So you'd be expected to live outside of the village. You'd be expected to do a particular occupation, usually a very demeaning occupation, like emptying the latrines, scavenging dead animals, sweeping the streets. You wouldn't be entitled to an education. You could only marry someone from within the untouchable community. You would not be allowed to take water from any public water supply source. You'd be expected to eat food that was left over from the higher caste families' houses, to wear cast-off clothes. You wouldn't be allowed anywhere near a Hindu temple, let alone go inside it. And if you happen to be walking down a public street, you would have to give a warning call, to give warning to people that you were on your way, and to give them chance to move out of your way. So that was the script. And Dr. Ambedkar himself, he did face a lot of discrimination and humiliation in his life. In a way, however much he achieved, however high he rose, he was never really allowed to forget that was his background. And there's times when he talks about weeping bitter tears at the humiliations that he faced. But he definitely did not follow the script. Sorry, I should have gone through. Great man, great Buddhist. Connection with Sangharakshita. And his message for us today. They're the headlines. So Dr. Ambedkar did get an education. So partly because of his own determination, partly because of the support of particular figures in society, he managed to get an education. He got a degree from Mumbai University, and then he travelled to Columbia in America and to London, and he got 2 PhDs, and he qualified as a barrister. So to come from that background and to achieve that, quite incredible. His second marriage was to a high caste woman. So that's another way that he didn't follow the script. In terms of water, he led great campaigns demanding the right of all people to take water from public water sources. And he also led campaigns for the rights of his people to enter Hindu temples. So he was a great campaigner on behalf of his people. He worked in many, many fields. He worked in social work. So this is an untouchable's helpless child widow asylum. He worked in the field of literature, wrote many articles, gave many talks. In the field of economics, in the field of law and politics. He was tireless in his attempts to emancipate his people. So a great social and political reformer and emancipator. And he rose to become the undisputed leader of the untouchables, of his people. He did give a warning call, but it was nothing like the warning call that I gave earlier. It was more like a warrior's cry. And his cry was, this corrupt caste system has to be demolished. And his cry was to demand freedom, equality, respect and justice. Not for himself, but for all. And in a way, in worldly terms, the culmination of all his efforts was that he was the main person who drafted the Constitution of India after India became independent. And in that Constitution, he enshrined what he'd been demanding. He enshrined freedom for all, equality for all, respect for all, justice for all. So a great political figure. But although he wrote the Constitution, and it's an incredible piece of literature, he also said to leave inequality between class and class, between sex and sex, and to go on passing legislation relating to economic problems is to make a farce of this Constitution and to build a palace on a dung heap. So he said that Constitution would be a palace on a dung heap unless it came with a change in people's minds, a change in people's attitudes. So like figures such as Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Dr Ambedkar, he conducted a peaceful moral revolution against oppression, against injustice, and it benefited the lives of millions of people. Like them, he could have set off a bloodbath, but he deliberately chose not to, because actually he was a deeply ethical and spiritual man. Throughout his life, he had to show great fortitude, great courage, energy, patience, persistence, and he faced a lot of hostility. He was an uncompromising man because he had to be uncompromising. He was never afraid to challenge people, to unsettle, and to make himself unpopular. He said, these views come from one, almost the whole of whose exertion has been one of continuous struggle for liberty for the oppressed, and whose only reward has been a shower of abuse from national leaders and journals. I have criticized the Hindus and the authority of their Mahatma. They hate me. To them, I am a snake in their garden. So Dr Ambedkar had no time for popularity. That was just not of interest to him. He was a formidable man, one of the great reformers of the 20th century. So why is he so little known in the West? Because compared to someone like Gandhi, he's little known. And that's partly because what the world was interested in was the independence movement. And the figure of Gandhi, who was very sophisticated at manipulating the media and spreading his fame far and wide. But Dr Ambedkar, he didn't have time for manipulating media or political games. He said, what's the point of independence for this country if so many people remain like animals, remain like slaves? So yeah, Dr Ambedkar, in his own right, a great man. He decided his purpose. He held to that purpose faithfully. He never gave up, and he always worked for the people right up to his last breath. So on those terms alone, it would be worthwhile celebrating Dr Ambedkar. But of course, for us, Dr Ambedkar is also a great Buddhist figure. He, so in 1935, which was 21 years before the conversion, he made a dramatic statement. He said, because we have the misfortune of calling ourselves Hindus, we are treated this way. but we shall repair our mistake now. I had the misfortune of being born with the stigma of an untouchable. However, it is not my fault. But I will not die Hindu, for this is in my power. And Dr. Ambedkar he'd had a connection with Buddhism throughout, from a very young age. But he considered many different options for which religion he might convert to. But in the end, he did choose Buddhism. He chose Buddhism mainly because he saw that fundamental to Buddhism were liberty, equality, and fraternity. He said he didn't learn those from the French Revolution, he learned those from the Buddha. So 1956, 60 years ago, he went for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And that kicked off what has been called a Dharma revolution, or it's been described as setting the wheel of the Dharma rolling again in India. Because India had died out for the previous 1,000 years. There'd been hardly any Buddhist presence in India at all. But now, as a result of Dr. Ambedkar's efforts, there are over 10 million Buddhists in India. And many of those are from the poorest section of society. So, in terms of him as a Buddhist figure, and sorry, I've forgotten photos. That's Dr. Ambedkar going for refuge to the Buddha. And then after he had taken refuge as an individual, he turned to the 380,000 people who were present, and he gave them the refuges and precepts. And then the third reason for us to celebrate Dr. Ambedkar is the very close connection that has developed between Dr. Ambedkar and Sangharakshita and Triratna. So Sangharakshita met Dr. Ambedkar 3 times. So you have to imagine that Sangharakshita was maybe in his mid to late 20s at the time. Dr. Ambedkar was in his 60s, so quite a generational gap. They met 3 times, discussed various topics. On occasions, Dr. Ambedkar was very challenging to Sangharakshita, and they kept in correspondence. But then when Dr. Ambedkar tragically died just 6 to 7 weeks after his conversion, Sangharakshita started to play a role in... he felt that he needed to shoulder something of the burden of this new Buddhist movement. And he worked as much as possible for the rest of the time that he was in India to continue the process of this new Buddhist movement and to make Dr. Ambedkar's vision a reality. He went on many lecture tours, and then when he came back to this country to start the Triratna Buddhist order in this country, then he sent some of his followers to India to start Triratna activities in India. So now half of the Triratna Sangha is in India. Yeah? More than half. There are about 9,000 mitras, 9 to 10,000 mitras. Don't have the exact figures. 1,500 people training for ordination, and that's pretty much 50-50 men and women. And a third of our order members are in India. Okay? So, a big connection there. And for all these people, Dr. Ambedkar is their leader. They are his direct followers. They have tremendous gratitude, reverence, and respect for him because he liberated their ancestors after centuries of oppression. So a couple of generations earlier, their ancestors were living in virtual slavery. So you can see the strength of devotion and gratitude and why that comes about. And these days in India, caste oppression is still a big problem. There are still caste atrocities. But at least people have a chance to live a human life. And that is due to Dr. Ambedkar. So I think it's really important, if we are to be one united Buddhist movement as Tejadhamma, for all of us to show solidarity, for all of us to really try and understand the significance of Dr. Ambedkar, to share the feelings of people in India as much as possible. And if possible, to take Dr. Ambedkar as a source of inspiration for us, even a hero for us. So Sangharakshita has he's spoken of being strongly influenced by Dr. Ambedkar. So Tejadhamma would not be the way it is without the contact that they had. In fact, Tejadhamma might not exist at all if that contact hadn't happened. Sangharakshita says, maybe our meetings were not important for him, but they were certainly important for me. And the evidence for this is that there are many areas of common ground. Many of the things that Sangharakshita has particularly emphasised, Dr. Ambedkar emphasised in quite a similar way. So some examples of this. So the centrality of going for refuge. Going for refuge is primary. So that moment of conversion. So the senior most monk in India gave the refuges and precepts to Dr. Ambedkar. Once he'd gone for refuge, he was a Buddhist. So he turned as an individual Buddhist and gave the refuges and precepts to his people. And in a way that was an expression that doesn't matter what you wear, doesn't matter what your lifestyle is, that what primarily defines one as a Buddhist is going for refuge. Both Sangharakshita and Dr. Ambedkar have always sort of emphasised the positive in Buddhism. So with Sangharakshita you have his emphasis on the positive precepts, the spiral path, the Noble Eightfold Path. And Dr. Ambedkar shared that. In a way, he said, well, my people, they know about suffering. We don't need to talk a lot about suffering. We don't need to talk about a lot about renunciation, because if you haven't got much to give up, then that's not very useful. So he always emphasised a vision of what people could be moving towards, a vision of freedom, a vision of beauty, a vision of truth. They've both emphasised the importance of work as a spiritual practice. Dr. Ambedkar, he was very keen to train a sort of army of Buddhist workers to go out into society and make change. And of course, traditionally for untouchables, their work was forced upon them. There was certainly work that they had to do, and Dr. Ambedkar said, no, don't do that. You take responsibility, you go out into society, you serve society, and transform your mind. They've also both emphasised the arts. The arts are a big part of our movement in India. So dance groups, drama groups, music. Any event that you go to, there'll be lots of music. In fact, when our pilgrimage group went to Tejadhamma's Buddhist Centre, we got a full musical performance. So that real emphasis on creating a new Buddhist culture with the arts present. The last two I want to spend a bit more time on. So individuality. So Sangharakshita's talked a lot about individuality. He's framed spiritual practice in terms of becoming a true individual, overcoming conditioning, overcoming attachment to the group, becoming a true individual. So Dr. Ambedkar knew that, from experience, that caste stops individuality. He saw that people had to break free from that as individuals, making their own free choices. He said, don't just become Buddhist because I'm becoming Buddhist. You need to make a choice to become a Buddhist in order to free yourself from this. He said, unlike a drop of water that submerges into the ocean, man does not lose his identity in society. A religion in which the individual has no importance is not acceptable to me. The individual takes responsibility. The individual has the courage to rethink and change his thoughts. So yeah, Dr. Ambedkar, he really was a man for the modern world. He encouraged people always to question their inherited beliefs, not to blindly accept what was not in accordance with reason. Above all, he encouraged radical individual responsibility. So like Sangharakshita, he said that Buddhism should be a matter of thinking through the principles, really understanding the principles, not following rules. He said as soon as we degenerate into merely following rules, we kill the responsibility that is the essence of a truly religious act. So yeah, in a way, a message for all of us. We must all be equally free to think for ourselves, to make informed choices about our own life, and to grow according to our ability and to create our own destiny. Again and again, Dr. Ambedkar spoke very strongly to his own people, really urging them to take responsibility for overcoming their conditioning. He said, don't be under the illusion that anyone will come and emancipate you. I call him free who with consciousness awake realizes his responsibilities, who is not a slave of conditions and old traditions, who does not follow blindly, but carves out his own aims according to ideals, who takes responsibility to decide how he will lead his life, who is self-illuminating like the sun. So I think the area where Sangharakshita has been most influenced by Dr. Ambedkar and where we have most to learn is his vision of the potential of Buddhism to transform the world around us. So when Sangharakshita was living in Kalimpong, a young man in his late 20s, Dr. Ambedkar wrote him a letter. And this is what he wrote. And of course, that time, Sangharakshita was a young monk in the Theravadan tradition. He said the monks must be more active. They must come out of their shell and be in the first rank of the fighting forces. I am glad you have started the Young Men's Buddhist Association in Kalimpong. You should be more active than that. And so very challenging, and that had a big impact on Sangharakshita. So Dr. Ambedkar saw that Buddhism can be a force for good in the world. He saw that a genuinely free society has to be founded on ethical principles. And those ethical principles have to be founded in the nature of existence. And of course, the fundamental ethic is metta. So only that foundation can be strong enough for the world with its fundamentalisms and its nationalisms, which are so sort of passionately convinced that they're right. The world is crying out today as well for a system of ethics based on metta and personal responsibility. Dr. Ambedkar said that we should see all people as my people, all people as my people, and to have an attitude of respect and reverence and empathy towards all. So, yeah, without metta, actually there can't be true liberty or equality, no true democracy, actually. For Dr. Ambedkar, Buddhism was a social revolution. It's not a private affair. He also said we're not just becoming good Buddhists so that we can become of use to society or helpful to society. For both Dr. Ambedkar and Sangharakshita, there can be no transformation of self without transformation of world. The two go completely hand in hand. Transforming your mind is transforming society. And the key to the spiritual life is to unify these two things. They can't be separated. So when Dr. Ambedkar converted, this wasn't a reactive political statement, and it wasn't an act of social work. It wasn't just about uplifting people from material poverty. He was a deeply spiritual man, and he saw that the spiritual life is an essential part of life for everyone and for society. He said that emancipation of mind is a necessary preliminary for the political expansion of a people. The greatest thing the Buddha has done is to tell the world that the world cannot be reformed except by the reformation of the mind of humanity and the mind of the world. So we urge people to have confidence that the Dharma itself is a force for good in the world. You must believe that to spread Buddhism is to serve mankind. That was his message. His vision was huge. He wasn't just interested in helping his own followers. He wasn't just interested in reviving Buddhism in India. His vision was huge. It was about Buddhism being what the world needs. And he wanted to start a peaceful Dharma revolution for the whole of India and for the whole of the world. I think the lesson for us in the modern West, the message for us in the modern West, the plea of Dr. Ambedkar for us, is to resist staying in a comfortable, consumerist, middle-class mentality. To resist withdrawing from the troubles of the world and focusing on developing inner peace. He said, a man is great because he finds a way to save society in its hour of crisis. One must act as a scourge of society. So that was his plea for us to really practice the Dharma and work and engage wholeheartedly with the intention to bring about real change in the world. Yeah, and with that confidence that to spread Buddhism is to serve mankind. So yeah, that's what today's about. So let's today really celebrate the life and vision of Dr. Ambedkar today, not only out of solidarity for those in India who have such reverence for him, but because he had a vision for the world. And that vision has shaped Tejadhamma as it is today, and it has something to teach us. So yeah, Dr. Ambedkar can be a source of inspiration for us here and now in Sheffield. So I'll just finish with some more rousing words of Dr. Ambedkar, which sort of echo down the ears and across the world. My advice to you is educate, agitate, organise. Have faith in yourself. The battle to me is a matter of joy. The battle is in the fullest sense spiritual. For ours is a battle not for wealth or power. Ours is a battle for freedom, for the reclamation of human personality. Okay. So one of the clearest and most helpful books about Dr. Ambedkar and Buddhism is by Sangharakshita. So it's called Ambedkar and Buddhism. And so over the last couple of years, there was a fundraising appeal for Sangharakshita's 90th birthday. And it raised over £100,000, so quite a big present. And one of the things that Sangharakshita asked for was for all of his writings, not only the current writings that were published, but his whole body of work to be published in a series of books which have become known as the complete works of Sangharakshita. There's going to be 27 volumes, all about that thick. Okay. And they're going to come out over the next 7 years. So, every few months a new book will be brought out. And the formal launch for that is next April. But what Windhorse Publishing have done is they brought out one in advance so that it can be launched today on this particular day. So this is volume 9, but it's the first one to be published. And it's called Dr. Ambedkar and the Revival of Buddhism, Part 1. Note, not Dr Ambedkar and the revival of Buddhism in India, but Dr Ambedkar and the revival of Buddhism, part 1. So, what's in this book is Ambedkar and Buddhism. That's the first part of the book. And then there are 33 talks from lecture tours that Sangharakshita did in India, and which previously haven't been published. So a really sort of rich source of information and inspiration about what Sangharakshita's message was to the followers of Dr Ambedkar. There's a foreword to this book by Subhuti. It's a very good foreword, and it's been released as a free booklet. So there are many of these free booklets downstairs. So it's Subhuti's foreword to this volume. So do take one of those away. It's a very good read. Okay. So another thing I have to tell you is, if I can find where is it? Yeah, there are also these leaflets, and these are about subscribing to the complete works of Sangharakshita. So it could be that you in the next 7 years you just buy one or two of these because they particularly appeal to you, but it might be that you want to accumulate the complete works of Sangharakshita for yourself or for a community or for another group of people. And there's a way that you can do that. So you can pay gradually over 5 years. Rather than having to pay a large amount, and you can get them in hardback or paperback, or in digital versions, or some combination of those. So, if you're interested in subscribing, those leaflets are downstairs, and there are a few copies of Volume 9 downstairs if you want to buy them. And the correct price is £17.95, but today only. We're selling them for £15. So next on our very rich menu, I'm going to invite Aryasakhi to speak to us for about 10 minutes. So Aryasakhi, do come up. She's been on both of our pilgrimages from Sheffield to India. And I've seen that both pilgrimages have had a real impact on her, and I've sort of noticed the fruits after the pilgrimage of you sort of growing exponentially after that experience. So India obviously has a very striking effect on me. So I've just asked Aryasakhi to speak a little bit more personally about her impressions and how her contact with Indian Buddhists has affected her. Yes. Thank you.
I can talk really loudly. Does that mean I can't talk loudly? Okay. What do I do with it?
You need to learn that, teaching.
Like that?
David, put your hand down.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I have been on both pilgrimages. And this is what I wore on the last pilgrimage. And when I got ordained earlier this year in Spain, I wore my 2011 top. And that's because it's smaller and I can't fit into it now. I've come back from Spain and I'm eating bad things again. And I got ordained in my pilgrimage uniform because that's how much it meant to me to go on the pilgrimages. So when I set off in 2011, I knew very little about India. I knew Buddhism started there, and I'd heard of Gandhi and Mother Teresa, and my mum used to talk about the black hole of Calcutta, and I knew there was a lot of poor people there, and there were some rich people there, and I knew the Beatles went there in the mid-60s. I knew it was an ex-British colony too. And I still don't know very much about India. So these are just some personal thoughts of mine. And I have thought about why going to India had such an impact on me. And I think it's because what it does, because it's so different, it uncovers your Englishness. It uncovers your sense of, well, of course the world is like that, this, and of course this is what I'm like, and this is how people behave. And it kind of wrenches that apart. So I'm going to talk about four things: calmness and order, people, devotion, and the projects. So calmness and order. So I like minimalism, blonde wood, jute flooring, white walls, everything ordered, systems, structures, things happening when they should happen, and me knowing when things are going to happen. I'm very, very comfortable with that, and I do a lot of work to make my world like that, with some success. Now, when you go to India, you come out of the airport or you come out of the station, and it is just a complete onslaught on your senses. The smells are different and stronger, the sounds are different and louder, even the colours seem different. The roads are incredible. They are full of cars and taxis and tuk-tuks and bikes and people and lorries painted beautiful colours. And the way you let somebody know that you're on the road is you honk very, very loudly. And there's cows on the road, which are treated with a lot of respect, and sometimes even an elephant, with which Satyajoti liked very much, I remember. I think it's quite typified by the fact that in England, when we want to warn people about children being nearby the road, there's a picture, the sign, of an older child holding a younger child, and they're walking like this. In India, they are running. They are not walking. Yeah, it's just amazing. So trains are late in England, but in India they can be 8 hours late. Yeah, you certainly get to know what you like and what you don't like. But I actually liked India. I actually liked the chaos as well. So that was interesting for me to find out. So people. So in England we have our personal space, and even though intellectually we know that's a cultural concept, actually I think there's part of us that think, well, this is what it's like really. Well, it ain't like that in India. In India, if you're curious, and I think many people in India are curious, you stare at people and you come very close to them. And you can be holding a puja at the side of a lake, and people will come and join you, not by standing respectfully at the back, which I guess is what most of us would do, but they will come and they will come in between you. They rejoice in talking to you, in having their photograph taken with you. You can hold their babies, which is very precious. You can have your photograph taken holding their babies, which is even nicer. And I like that. I like that. And I was thinking that someone told me that in India, in England, you often kind of have to earn your friendships with people. So you like somebody and they like you, and you get to know each other and you get to trust each other, and eventually you're friends. And it can take quite a while. That seemed a little bit different in India as well. The relationships between the Indian support team and the English pilgrims, and when we visited the various social projects, it just seemed there was friendship and love and warmth and affection and trust. And there it was, just waiting for you, or just accessible to you. And that is so precious, and it made me feel, it made me realise just how tight I am. Maybe you feel that too, with with how much you show that you love people and feel connected to them. So the third thing is devotion. So I get very little out of going to man-made structures. I have been to Stonehenge and I have been to Hadrian's Wall, and I can tell you they do nothing for me at all. And I thought that would be the same in India. I thought, okay, so we're going to go to some ruins of this university, and we're going to go to some stupas. I had a bit of a hope for the stupas, and we're going to go to some ruins of stupas. And really, okay, well, we'll do it because that's what people do when they go on pilgrimage. And I was quite shocked to find myself walking around a ruin of a stupa, just the bottom of the stupa, which was made out of bricks, a big, huge, big circle. And I walked around and I was crying, and I was chanting a mantra, and I was looking at how the candle wax from all the pilgrims that had been there in the last months or years had made patterns, whites and blues and reds. And I remember thinking, for goodness sake, this is just some bricks in a circle, and maybe they don't even know that it actually was this important stupa. So that's what my head was doing, but my heart was crying. And I can't explain what happened. What it feels like happens is that something quite primordial happens, that somehow you are touched in a way somewhere deep inside you, and that was what India was like. It was like, you know, here is the forest where Angulimala roamed, and here is where the Buddha gave his first teaching, and my goodness, this is the tree, and this is the tree under which the Buddha gained enlightenment. Here is the cave where Ananda gained enlightenment. Here is the view that Sangharakshita saw when he walked upstairs in a temple to receive ordination. Here is Vulture's Peak. This is what the Buddha saw when he stood at the top of Vulture's Peak. And you know what? If you scramble down these rocks, here is a stretch of rock where you can walk up and down and you can look at the countryside, and this is where the Buddha did his walking meditation at Vulture's Peak. And here is Nalanda, here are the ruins of Nalanda, and this is where Shantideva wrote the Bodhicharyavatara. And this here, this place here, we think, admittedly, is where Padmasambhava meditated. It is just incredible. And it felt as though those places just leaked into me. They leaked their brightness and their knowledge of something that is other than this world that we know, this material world. So quite incredible, quite incredible. Oh, I'm getting old. Yeah. I guess it was leaking truth to me. And lastly, I wanted to mention some of the projects that we visited, both in 2011 and 2015. So some examples were, we visited a girls' boarding school where girls from villages were receiving high-quality education. We visited a place where you could study, you could learn how to sew, you could get medical skills. We saw a little nursery so the mums could go to work, and the children were tiny children, and they were sat cross-legged on little mats, and they took it in turns to stand up and say nursery rhyme and sit down again. I thought, gosh, they were so unfussy, and yeah. We visited a project that taught judo. It was really late. We were 2 hours late getting there. And it was anyway late when we were supposed to get there. And we arrived. And the mums and dads were still waiting, most of them. And most of the children were still waiting patiently for us. And they put on a judo exhibition. And we visited Nalanda, You've seen a picture of a huge golden Buddha on Maitridasa's... Pardon?
Nagaloka.
Nagaloka, what did I say? Nalanda? No. Nagaloka, sorry. And that provides a residential training course for young men and women across India. So they learn about meditation and the Dharma, they learn about Dr Ambedkar and the principles of social activism. And visiting the projects was amazing. Such warmth, such exuberance, such belief in change and energy, and it was social activism in action, and it stays with you. It just stays with you, that feeling there of that can do, this is happening. So I'm going to stop, because I'm sure that's 10 minutes. Go to India if you can. It is amazing, it will change your life. And it's really nice for our Indian brothers and sisters in the Dharma to meet us on their territory, in their homeland. Support Karana if you can, which funds the social projects. Support IDT, which is our organisation to support people's ordination processes in India. And thank you to people who took me to India.
So, next pilgrimage, February 2018. Okay, so we're coming to the main event, which is going to be an interview between Satyajyoti and Tejadhamma. Tejadhamma, come to the front. Let me introduce you. This is Tejadhamma. His name means, what were you saying there?
Fire of the Dharma.
Fire of the Dharma, flame of the Dharma, fire of the Dharma, which is a very apt name, as they often are. I've known Tejadhamma, I think, for about 6 years. And we meet up most times that I go to India, twice a year. Usually we start by going for a coffee and cake, which he buys. And then Tejadhamma arranges for me to go and visit one or more of his projects. So I've been to karate projects and homework clubs and various things. And so I've got to know a little bit about Tejadhamma's work and about him. Just really impressed by Tejadhamma's passion and determination, actually. Aryasakhi used the words energy and belief in change. I was thinking of you when she said that. Activism. So Tejadhamma has set up a project called People to People, which he'll talk more about. One thing that I've always been noticed with Tejadhamma is when you talk about people to people, you're always proud of the fact that you don't only work with Buddhists. And Tejadhamma works with Buddhists, with Muslims, with Hindus, with Christians. He's Punjabis also. So, very sort of humanitarian ideals at heart. In a sense, the Dharma is really important for Tejadhamma. He's a serious practitioner. Yeah, he knows what he talks about. But in terms of his reaching out into society, in a way he's expressing Dr Ambedkar's vision that this is for everyone. This is not just for a particular group of people in society, this is for everyone. And I've always admired that about him. I'm going to leave some rejoicing to Satyajyoti. Who's going to come? And